Welcome to the New York Outlook for Wednesday, the 28th of February 2024. Starting off with the economic calendar, we have GDP news for the US session, which is considered highly significant, and thus, for that reason, during a London lull, we don't trade and we wait for opportunities to develop subsequent to the news release, dependent on what the news release suggests. If the news release is positive for the USD, then we'll short GBPUSD, or at least that's the bias. And if the USD news is negative, then we'll consider longing GBPUSD. Having said that, let's move on to the 4-hour charts. What we do know is that we're still in this bearish market structure, with the latest information being that the pullback phase primary leg, which is this leg right here. Perhaps I can mark it pullback leg. We know that Friday it was extended in and around this area, with this pullback LPOS being the last point of supply from which we can consider counter trend longs, and you can see that's precisely what is happening at the moment. We're having a reaction to that. With regards to this interaction right here, we consider it a potential liquidity area for price to come towards as we move towards the downside, with the ultimate objective of targeting this forward swing low. As we know, the pro-trend move is to short, and that's the ultimate objective for any of our trade ideas. However, because of the pullback phase being extended right here, we know that the last point of supply has the possibility to actually give a reaction and actually pull us deeper into this pro-trend extreme, and perhaps bring us into this particular POI at the very extreme, and closing the entire window of imbalance or fair value gap that exists in and around this area right there. So having said that, from a high time frame narrative perspective, going into the New York session, we have reasons to both long and short. And because of that, let's evaluate what's going on in the 5 minutes. So ideally, in the London session, what we said is that we wanted the Asian high of the day to be taken, and then either try and position ourselves with a Frankfurt high of the day, or London high of the day, and then position ourselves to take shorts. However, what we can then see is that price just continued to plummet down to the downside. It actually took out multiple Asian unswept lows, and that explains the high momentum fueled move to the downside. This liquidity that you're seeing right here is 4H liquidity in the leg potentially, that may be taken out later. It's what I marked out right there. And then in terms of the actual New York session, in terms of shorts, we've pretty much moved majority of the daily range, and since there isn't any additional Asia range within let's say 4 days since initial creation being unswept, there's no reason to be aggressively short. At the moment, there is current day aggressive reasons to be longs, because we have the current day Asia high of the day and the previous Asia high of the day to target. However, given that we are in the pro-trend move, there is the chance that these Asia liquidity levels won't be liquidated right now. But to be honest, anything is possible. So on that assumption, what is the idea for the New York session? To be fair, my New York session bias is to only trade to the long side. However, we'd need New York GDP to be negative to then support long GU. In terms of actually validating the trade idea, what we can see is that we have a London low of the day situated right here. We can see that the London range starts, I can mark it out and you can see it. So that's the London range, which will last up until 1455, after which point, in order to validate this London low of the day, we would require either for the New York session to take the high out, in which case we'll have proper session validation of the low of the day, or alternatively we'd need New York negative news, which will then tell us that the London low of the day is likely to hold, and then we can position ourselves accordingly, perhaps with the trade somewhere in and around that area. However, the key being that we have to wait for the news release first, and then we can act accordingly. So 3:30 p.m. my time is a key time frame to monitor, and I'll set an alarm for that, with the objective of targeting this Asia liquidity in and around this area. It's probably a good place to full TP given that we are counter trend, and the overall idea highly support shorting. um, in terms of this counter trend play from the pullback phase OB, what we can also see is that we have sufficient IRL to the upside, so there isn't really a concern to suggest that there isn't reason for longs. There certainly is. We just need a couple of things to align, as I mentioned earlier. So all in all, that's pretty much my. Oh, before I conclude, if New York puts in the low of the day, provided that the low of the day is supported by this GBP news, and by that I mean 3:30 p.m. news, will need to take out the London low of the day, and the 3:30 p.m. candle will should create the low of the day, but at the same time resume back up without subsequent to 3:30 candles putting in new low of the days, at which point the New York low of the day would be invalid. However, if um, let's assume this is the 3:30 candle that puts in a New York low of the day, and then we've got obviously our change of character in terms of order flow, and we come up, thus validating this demand POI to trade from, and New York news supporting why this New York low of the day should hold, then we can consider taking this long trade with the objective of targeting that. Obviously, like I said, if 3:35, maybe 3:45, even 4 o'clock news puts in new low of the days, then it means that the daily direction was intended to be short, and trading longs just yeah, longs are off the cards, and shorts was the primary move. Obviously, like I said, we already moved majority of the daily range, and we don't really have any reason to be aggressive to the downside. So because we've already moved 70%, I'm not going to consider further short trades. That's pretty much the end of day sorry, the New York outlook. I hope you have a good session, and we'll chat again for the end of day review.